The Denver Nuggets, not in the Western Conference Finals. Another year, another second round, another Game 7 loss. But given the context of how great this OKC team is that actually a win? What does it actually say about the Denver Nuggets that despite all of their issues, the injuries to Aaron Gordon, the injuries to Michael Porter Jr., the lack of consistent bench help, does it say a lot more about how close this team actually is that they didn't end up winning this series? And we're going to talk about Jeff Morton and Ryan Blackburn had some great articles that came out detailing a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff about this Denver Nuggets team. We're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about AG's playoff run and really what made him so good and then what is so important about him next year that's going to make this team even better. Y'all, everything is on the line for the Denver Nuggets team. We got a lot to talk about today on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome to Locked On Nuggets. This is your host, Swipa. This is your team every single day. I hope you are having a spectacular, phenomenal, wonderful day. I hope that you're getting some well-needed rest this week and that you're working hard and that things are going well for you. We're here to talk about the Denver Nuggets. This is my first show with you since the Denver Nuggets lost in Game 7 of the second round of the Western Conference playoffs. And, man, just what an incredible run that they had. You know, for the Denver Nuggets, for them to end this playoff run 7-7, where they beat the team in the Clippers that they were not favored to beat, that I didn't think they would beat based on how the regular season ended. For them to play against a historically dominant team, especially one of the best defenses ever in the OKC Thunder, and to play versus them, to take them to a 7-game series, it's a big deal. But as many feel and as many recognize, this team and everything they went through, there were so many ways that things could have gone differently for this season. There are so many ways that the team could have been even better. And y'all, despite the holes, despite the injuries to Michael Porter Jr., the Nuggets were very well within just 2 fourth-quarter closeouts from ending this series in 6 or less games. Now, you know, a lot of that goes back to Nikola Jokic missing a lot of shots down the stretch of that game. A lot of that goes back to the missed free throws from him and Aaron Gordon. A lot of that also goes back to Jamal Murray going 5 of 15 in one of those games as well. But, y'all, they were in position. They were in position, and then they were doing everything that they needed to do in order to win this gig. And I think, you know, when you look at Nikola Jokic in the series that he had, and you look at the inconsistency games 2 through 4, you look at the fact that Russell Westbrook had a couple of moments in game 1. You look at the fact that Jamal Murray had some really good games in this series. You look at the fact that Aaron Gordon, 22 and 14 to start off the series in game 1. And then Michael Porter Jr. only had one really good game in that second round, but he had really 2 good games in the playoffs. He had a 15-15 game, I believe, in game 2 when he hurt his shoulder versus the Clippers. And then he had a 21-point game in which he was making anything and everything in game 3. But outside of that, you just didn't get a lot from him. And a lot of that was just because his shoulder was so injured and the AC sprain really got to him. Man, I think for me, some of my initial takeaways are the Nuggets, with all the issues they had, they were so close. And they were so close to another title. They were so close to beating the OKC Thunder. But the thing that ended up shortcoming them was the thing that had shortcome them all season, is their inability to find consistent answers around the margins enough during the regular season. And on the top of this, for them not to be able to find consistency within their starters because of injuries. Like, it's just so many things that happen together. And again, if Jokic is better in a couple of those games as a shot maker, then yeah, the season extends. And I think they win games 3 or 4. But they didn't. And then they lose the game well, they won game 3, but they win games 4. And then in game 5, Nikola Jokic goes for another 40, 15, and 5 game, and they lose that game on the margins and stuff as well. And there's just so many things that I think could have been handled differently for this year. And I'm going to highlight a couple articles, one from Jeff Morton, right, real for the Denver Stiff. I think he had an amazing article. And then you also had another one that was from another one today that was from Ryan Blackburn. And I'm gonna see if I can get Jeff in here actually as well and see. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. He said he's available to be able to join in. But all that stuff put together, man, I just think that there were pathways for this team. There were pathways for them to be even better than what they are right now. And I think that they were a few things away for them to be able to change how their season went. But, man, it's just so frustrating, y'all. It's so frustrating. I wish that the team had a little bit more gutsy to them that allowed for them to be able to be a bit more advantageous in the offseason. You know, my brain, all of the playoffs and all of the regular season keeps going back to Calvin Booth saying that Nikola Jokic should not lose playoff games because of three-point shooting. That goes back to the reason you don't bring in Calvin, you don't want to bring KCP back, is because you don't believe that you needed him and his veteran presence to win. You wanted to elevate Christian Brown and Julian Strawther, but on the other end of that, if they needed to make additions, they'd be able to do that as well. But I'm going to bring Jeff Morton in here so we can have a larger conversation about his great piece. Jeff, how are you?
I'm great. Is this the first time I've been on your show or you've been on mine? Is this the first? Oh my God.
But I feel like it's not actually like, because obviously we run across the way for quite some time now, and you've been in this business way longer than I have. And I actually remember reading your stuff in like the 2010s, like back when I was just kind of like, watching the team from afar and all that. But no, in the reason, Jeff, I asked you to come up today if you had time, and I appreciate you coming in such a late notice. You wrote I think a stupendous article, and I think it highlighted so many issues with some of the things that had happened with the team from a thinking standpoint. And I guess before we even get into the article, Jeff, when you think about what this season was, and when you think about kind of like the end of the year and them taking the OKC Thunder to 7, my thing is it says a lot about how gritty the team is that they were able to do that despite the injuries to Porter and then the lack of bench. But for me, it also makes me frustrated too, because I'm like, they were that close to beating this team and they didn't have consistent help off the bench. So when you look at losing to the OKC in game 7, and then you see them, they blow out the Wolves in game 1, they're probably going to run their way to a title. What feelings do you have about the team now, kind of 4 days removed from ending the season in game 7 versus OKC?
About the same as they were going in. I said on my podcast, it's like, if you look at it, they went 7-7 in the playoffs. That's basically what they were in the regular season. It was I think what happens is like increased effort papers over some issues. Mm-hmm. The depth issue never went away, and it was eventually going to catch up with them, and it did in the playoffs. Specifically in crucial moments in the Thunder series. Now I think depth is overrated in the playoffs, and I still do, but I do think the cumulative minutes is the reason. And I think Jokic having to carry, as I said in the article, the Nuggets like circus elephant, it really just eventually it just gets to you. I don't think that's why I think they, if we're going to talk about why they lost, if you're allowed to tackle the opposing team's center repeatedly with smaller players, eventually it's going to catch up with you. And I think the accumulation of that sort of defense got to the Nuggets, but they were close. Sometimes it's about matchups, and the Nuggets always matched up well with the Thunder. But they also went 7 games with a lesser team in the Clippers. Mm-hmm. So it's like the true Nuggets were the 7-7 playoff performance, in my view. That is where they were all year, and that's basically where they ended up at the end of the second round.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so tough because, you probably saw that I didn't pick them to beat the Clippers, and it had nothing to do with, like, I think not believing in the team, but it was just like, I don't know if I can just let my fandom or even my emotion get in the way of what I saw. Like, this team couldn't play versus high-level teams all year. The defense wasn't there. The consistency wasn't there. The connectivity wasn't there. But then all of a sudden, because they had that championship grit. And I think in large part because of the fact that David Adelman did such a great job of pulling it out of them, especially the defensive tenacity they lacked in the regular season, they kind of showed that this was always there, but they just didn't have the juice or the guys to be able to do it in the regular season consistently. And man, I think, and I brought this up before you joined, that's where my brain goes with the Calvin Booth comments from last year in Media Day. Because I remember talking to Ryan about this a lot.
Right.
You know, when he said that, you know, he doesn't believe that 3-point shooting should be the reason why Nikola Jokic like loses series. I was just like, well, that seems like a very like old school way of thinking about like where the NBA is. And then when he also said that like, hey, if we do need to add more 3-point shooting, well, the reason we didn't sign KCP is because we wanted to have leeway to be able to make an adjustment to add someone to the roster by the trade deadline. But then when we get to the trade deadline, there's nothing that changes as well, even with all the issues we saw. So it just felt like there was like conflicting opinions within the organization, which we know about because of all the stuff that's happened, but also even some of the follow-up stuff based on what we heard in the summer, it just didn't happen. And so it just felt like there are 1 or 2 decisions away, Jeff, from possibly being in another NBA championship this year.
It's weird, and it's weird how the playoffs kind of break down. I mean, who would have thought the Dallas Mavericks would have ended up in the NBA Finals last year? I'll be honest with you, no one thought about that, and a lot of that had to do with the Denver Nuggets not overcoming the Minnesota Timberwolves, and well, almost exclusively because that Nuggets team was better than that Mavericks team. So you're like, okay, playoffs are about matchups. Playoffs are like you just want to give yourself a chance to get into the playoffs at a relatively healthy rate. I mean, like do you want to have guys like in 2023 where everyone was healthy? And one of the reasons everyone was healthy in 2023 was, if everyone recalls, the Nuggets basically took their foot off the gas in early March. They were so far ahead that they didn't have to pedal to the metal, and they lost a whole bunch of games by basically half-assing it, pardon my language. And I think that sort of thing is something they've missed because they've had to press. And specifically this last year, people have said they didn't have any effort. Yeah, I think the effort towards the end of the Malone era was very bad. But I do think that those last 3 games, having to win those, and then just the cumulative emotional weariness eventually catches up to you, because they were clearly done with whatever situation they had before. And then it gets to the playoffs, and then it's like, you know, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in that point? Because your flaws are still there. Yeah. You can only out effort your flaws for so much. And that is really basically what happened against the Thunder.
Well, look, y'all, we're on the other side. We're going to dive deep into Jeff's article because I just thought that there were just so many strong points in there and things that I think highlighted some of the larger issues. Because, again, building a basketball team, it's a bunch of big decisions, but it's also a lot of really small decisions that need to be made as well. But we'll talk about all that and more here on the other side at Locked On Nuggets. Now, shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting. But between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why I love using CarGurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. Now, with over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. Now, you need a deal you trust. CarGurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings. The best feature, price drop alerts, so you know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. Plus, the in-depth vehicle details give you a peace of mind before stepping onto any new lot. So buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus.com. CarGurus.com. We'll be right back for the second segment here at Locked On Nuggets. We're back here for the second segment of Locked On Nuggets. This is your host, Swipa, with your team every day. Thank y'all so much for helping us get to 10,000 subscribers on the YouTube side. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe. We got more and more great content coming up here on Locked On Nuggets. If you're listening to this on the audio side, Spotify, Apple iTunes, give us a 5-star review. That way more and more people can listen to the great content made at Locked On Nuggets. And you see, we got great, all-time great Denver guests like Jeff Morton. Jeff Morton is a Denver GOAT. Literally, when I think of Denver sports, whether it's Mike Kliss, whether it's Singer, whether it's Jeff Morton, there's like this like holy trinity, including Vic Lombardi. There's like these people that you grow up listening to. And Jeff, you are absolutely 100% one of them. And like I said, I'll say it again. I said at the beginning of the show, I was a fan before Swipa ever became a media member. Like when there was no iteration of this, when I was just Deo Cameron, grew up in Park Hill, Colorado. You know, I would watch and listen and all that kind of stuff. So I'm obviously a big fan. I think you do great work. And I think you have a very, very unique voice in the Denver space as well. So a lot of respect to you.
Well, I appreciate it. And I have this saying that people think basketball was invented the day before they became a fan, because everyone who is a fan is so young.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, I've realized that more and more, as the average basketball age of someone is like frighteningly young for me. And I was old when I got into it. And I'm like, oh God, but it's been cool. And I thank you for reading it. I mean, Stiffs in 2009 was, it was the Wild Wild West.
And Jeff, when did you get into the actual Denver media space on the Nuggets side?
2000, Stiffs. I started writing for Stiffs in 2009. And we were all credentialed in 2012. So for the 57 win team was our introduction as far as credentialed media, but we were fully ingratiated in the media the 3 years before that. And it was just, that's when it started. George Karl.
I was in college back in that day when you first got started with everything else. So I mean, that's a long time. So that's a lot of dedication. So, and then I guess just to do a little bit of a lead-in tease, I can kind of ask you some questions here. So when you were formulating this article, and in particular, you were talking about the KSC side, which I think it's a very important and I think a unique perspective about this, because I do agree to what you're saying. Like you even started with this emphasis on this TikTok. They're in a new era. They've never, and I've talked about this so many times, Jeff, the thing that separates the Nuggets from organizations like the Lakers or Boston is they might be competing with them now for championship, but they have never had preeminent all-time talent, meaning you have to know how to build around these players because the windows are so unbelievably short relative to your history. And this is the first time where the Cronkies have been handed one of the 10, 15 best players ever, and it's your job to make sure you win as many titles with that player as possible. Jeff, so when you look at the landscape of the Nuggets and you see some of the infighting that happened, and you see kind of how Josh was in some way hands-off, but then in some very particular ways hands-on, and then you kind of know where Stan is, and then you look at where the arena is and the practice facility and just some of the stuff they don't have. In terms of how you're evaluating where the Cronkies exist currently and where ownership and the emphasis that's going to be on them this summer, what do you think is actually on the table for them? And how big of a summer is this going to be for them as an ownership group?
Well, it's critical. Absolutely critical. The thing about this is, and I also mentioned this in the article, there's nothing like having a true superstar. There's absolutely nothing like it in the NBA, very specifically the NBA. It's different from football, different from NHL, it's different from Major League Baseball. And Major League Baseball is probably the only one that could come close to it due to guys being individual, basically playing their own individual games in a team construct. This is, you could make the argument that Nikola Jokic has single-handedly inflated the value of the Denver Nuggets by himself. The Nuggets don't have a practice facility. The Nuggets weren't able to be seen in Denver by a majority of its population for 6 years. This is all Nikola Jokic. And this is the responsibility that comes with that. And I think Stan and Josh, I do want to see some acknowledgement that maybe not what they quote owe Nikola Jokic, because I know Matt hates that sort of thing, like owing Nikola Jokic anything, or the whole everything is too much Jokic, the role players matter. I get that, and we also saw that this year. But Jokic ain't guaranteed forever, man, and he's already 30, and this is something that they have to be keenly aware of to make sure that obviously you don't mess everything up by making a Dame Lillard type trade. And quite frankly, you could, I mean, to digress a little, the Dame Lillard trade, Dame was already kind of teetering as a decline kind of player prior to Milwaukee trading him. It's one of the reasons Portland was okay with trading him. And then they get him, and it's like, okay, you're getting a guy who's in his mid-30s. You don't make a trade like that, but you do understand the responsibility of maximizing and not burning Jokic out.
Mm-hmm.
That is the key. Burnout is just, you could see it on his face this year. He was miserable. I have not seen Jokic this miserable ever. I used to talk to him in the locker room. I've never seen Jokic this just have no joy in his game. You need to take that, what you've seen with him, and turn it into something else. Turn it into a guy who was, quite frankly, even the 22-23 season, you could tell he was, maybe it's not, he's never been happy-go-lucky, but it was a lot better than it was this year. Do what it takes to make him not burn out.
Yeah, and I think some of this too is, again, you're a Denver resident, the King of Thornton himself. Like John Elway, this was the responsibility. You knew when you had John Elway, this is what comes with it. You got to get Terrell, you got to get Shannon, you got to get Ed McCaffrey, you got to get Rod Smith. Then they went and got defense. You got Trevor Price. Like, you did what you had to do. I mean, even Joe Sakic, like, you had the 2096 year, then you had the 2001 year, and then you had Forsberg, and then remember they got Ray Bork from the Boston Bruins and brought him in, and they ended up winning and all kind of stuff. This is what it takes. And I think, when you look at like Denver getting Peyton Manning, they also knew, like, we have to fortify him. They gave him the greatest defense in Broncos history in 2015. I feel like this is just, in Denver especially, this city's used to winning titles. This is not title town to the same degree as Green Bay is, but like, if you play here and you're a superstar, then we want to help you win as much as possible. And I think with the Cronkies, they have gotten away with, I think, allowing for the organization to kind of exist in this kind of place of, well, it's not like upper tier, top tier. It's not like super small market. We're not like super invested in some things, but we're really invested in paying the players, all that stuff. But then when it comes to the front office, coaches, they're just like our limitations. And we're at the place now where, Jeff, Jokic, remember when Calvin Booth said he's the steward of the Jokic era, he basically said that we're in the middle of it right now. Like, we're in the middle of his prime. Okay, let's just pretend then Jokic has 4 to 5 more years of this, of like all-time great level basketball. Jeff, for me, if they only win one title in this, for me, relative to being in Denver and having one of those guys, I think that is a catastrophic failure relative to the rest of NBA history.
Oh, 100% it is. Because you have literally the best player in basketball. And if you don't feel the weight of that, you are insane. And obviously, but there's a difference now with the aprons and the way the caps is structured and all of this. The Cronkies are obviously treating the second apron as a hard salary cap. So what do you do within those confines? What do you do to maximize what you have? And, the 2 timelines thing. Do you mind if I ask you a question, by the way, because I listen to your show too? So I myself am not 100% against the whole quote 2 timelines thing.
Yeah.
I think the Nuggets, pardon my language again, half-assed it. I think if you're going to do that, you need to go trade into the lottery and get high ceiling players. What the Nuggets' mistake was, they stayed at the back and they drafted and traded up into late first rounds to get, guys like, I hate to pile on Peyton Watson here, but they traded a future first to get Peyton Watson, a guy who was never projected to be a first-round player. And rather than doing that, do what you can, maybe package with a veteran, move up if you're going to do that. Because what's happened, in my view, and this is why I'm asking you this question, the attrition happened. You're losing talent, but you're not replacing it with equivalent talent. You're replacing KCP, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, all these guys with late firsts who need time to develop, who are old rookies, but they're still not as high as, saying, lottery talent. So essentially, the talent is not there. This disparity is becoming greater because who you've been drafting isn't necessarily the perfect pieces. And they're probably best as, other than Christian Brown, maybe, probably best as guys who are maybe just very minor role players, not pivotal role players like they've had.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to answer that. I'm going to do it on the other side.
Okay.
We got to get an ad
I took so much time.
No. Trust me. I have very strong feelings about this, so I completely agree with you. But we're going to be back in the third segment to answer that exact question here, Locked On Nuggets. Now, y'all, when I found out that Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about the quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. Let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. Now, I've always had issues with underwear, fit, comfort, finding the right style for me, and Skims changed all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone. Boxer brief, classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance and comfort and style. Now, again, I love having the Stretch 3 boxer brief for travelers. Is great when you're on the move. If you just need something that you got to get to the gym after work, that is the great way to tap in. I'm hooked on them. They're perfect for my active lifestyle. They move with me, never lose their shape, and stay in place all day, whether I'm working out or just running errands. They're the most comfortable and reliable underwear I ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. So shop Skims Men at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcasts in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Skims is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. Y'all, we'll be back for the final segment here, Locked On Nuggets. Y'all, we are back for segment 3 here at Locked On Nuggets here with Jeff Morton, the King of Thornton, the GOAT himself. And he asked me a question that I know some of y'all have heard me talk about this before, y'all. Now, Jeff, I cannot tell you. When they would stay put, all of those drafts, except the DeRon Holmes year, they did jump up 3 spots, obviously last year in the draft.
Yeah.
When they would stay put, Jeff, I was just like, all right. OKC got J-Dub in the top 12.
Yeah.
Dallas Mavericks, they got Derek Lively in the top 12.
Yeah.
Like, you go after players. If Calvin Booth, this is the whole thing. If you're going to go young, remember they have 6 rookie contracts on the team, 6. If you're going to go 2 timeline, it's not even like they got Moody. Remember, Moses Moody, those were lottery picks. Jonathan Kuminga was a lottery pick. Podziemski was the only one that's not a lottery pick, and he might be the best one of them all, but that was luck.
Yep.
Like, you at least give yourself the best opportunity and chance by going as high as possible, getting a quality rookie who can come in and immediately contribute, instead of we're simply going to develop, and hopefully by year 2, hopefully by year 3, hopefully by the end of the rookie contract, these are NBA players. And for me, when you got a superstar, because this started when Jokic was 28,
yep.
You start this process during an age 28 season, and I'm just like, but in the NBA, you win with typically between 25 and 31-year-old talent. And then even if you do that, I think the draft concept was off. I thought waiting to 29 for Julian Strawther, waiting for 30 for Peyton Watson, and then waiting again. Now they got DeRon at 23, but remember they gave up 3 second-round picks to do that, and the same 3 second-round picks they offloaded, as you mentioned in the article, for Reggie Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for me, it's a missing of the logic that went into, if you're going to do 2-time timeline, you got to go good. And and giving yourself an opportunity to know this is going to be a hit, because at the end of the first round, now you can find a Jimmy Butler, Jeff. You can find a Rudy Gobert. Yeah. You can find a Pascal Siakam. It's all possible, but the risk of that are crazy.
Right. And
that for me was always it. It's like, well, if you're going to do young because of the CBA and because of where the money is, then why would you not give yourself the best opportunity and go get in the lottery?
You and I are simpatico here, because I just the way I've seen that, I've watched the Denver Nuggets since Alex English was a player, and it's kind of like there's nothing new under the sun. It is, I mean, like the game is played differently, but the concept of basketball is the same. You need the best players possible, and the Nuggets almost beat a Thunder team that had better depth.
Yeah,
because the Nuggets had arguably a better starting 5.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Well, that just means that your players on the back end aren't as good, and the Nuggets got worn down by that. Well, how do you supplement that? You get talent players. If you are against the concept of not having rookie scale deals, and basically this is what the flag the Nuggets staked is, like rookie scale. I actually had a conversation with someone within the Nuggets organization about this while they were making these picks, and my point to them was that, okay, the reason the Spurs worked is because it was during an era where no one was taking advantage of European and South American players, and they exploited a market inefficiency, is I guess the way they call it right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason that Parker and Ginobili were able to work. It was during a time where no one was doing it. Now everyone is. You can't be the Spurs again. You have to get talent because everyone in the league is getting better. And it seemed like the Nuggets were stuck in 2002 with some of this thinking. And I think that is what set them back. I mean, obviously the team's still good. It's like it's not a death knell. But the issue is, if you're going to lose talent, place them with equal talent. And that's not what they've done.
Yeah, replacing KCP with no one. I mean, we talked about this all last offseason. It just was like, you already in game 7 last year, remember, they only had 2 players score more than 7 points in that game. So, like, you needed another player. And then you just get rid of KCP, and then because of the money and because you wanted to elevate Brown and then elevate Julian Strawther. And I was just like, well, but you're taking away a veteran starter and then hoping that this other player is going to take a leap. Now, Christian did take a leap, but Christian is also not yet good enough all the way around to compensate for all of the loss. He made up for a lot. But again, if you just had another 3-point shooter, you just had another person that could dribble the basketball, that would have made a big difference. And I think, again, that goes back to the Reggie Jackson decision to just throw 3 second-round picks and get rid of that player. I mean, you probably heard me on the timeline. I thought Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a player you absolutely go after, even just Chris Dunn, like having other options to be able to do that. And I think for me, you look in the second round in 2023, again, remember they took Julian Strawther at 29, and then they took 32, Jalen Pickett, and they took Hunter Tyson at 37. And for me, I'm just like, but even if you know what this team is, and Jeff, Jokic's biggest disability as a player is he's not a rim protector, meaning you need guards and wings who are able to stop penetration to allow for him to play at most in space and away from the basket, because that's what he's best at. Yeah. But then the Nuggets are like drafting players that don't do any of those things, and then also are not like upper tier offensive players at the same time. And I'm just like, I feel like we're drafting around like, hopefully my strategy plays out rather than what's actually best for Jokic and Murray and Porter and Gordon, and what do they actually need for them to be where they need to be, if that makes sense. Oh, no, it makes total sense. And look, I don't blame the philosophy. And once again, the 2 timeline things, whatever. I said this in articles and on my podcast, old rookies are still rookies, regardless of how much experience they have in college. The NBA is a different thing. It takes time. The curve is flattened. You want it to go up and down, but flatten it if you have to devote time to developing people. But if you're going to do it, you got to go all in. And Nuggets, just to me, in my view, Calvin Booth's biggest failing is that he didn't go all in on getting the key talent, the big talent, the guy who you can, run a second unit without the need to have Nikola Jokic on the floor all the time. Jamal has always struggled with that. Jamal works great with Jokic. He doesn't always work well just doing it by himself, because Jamal just does his thing. It's completely different without it. If you had a guy who was trustworthy, who can run the second unit, that relieves a ton of pressure off of Jokic. It doesn't have to be a center. Just a guy who can just be the guy. Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan did not play the same position. Scottie Pippen gets out there and he just runs the second unit for the Bulls very well. You don't have to have equivalent positions. Just have the talent. And I think that is what, at least to me, what I saw in the second round, and even going down the stretch this year. The Nuggets were lacking equivalent talent to the way they were in 2023, when you could argue that they were they were, in my view, almost the peak talent of what you can get with Jokic. And the atrophy since then has just, at least in my mind, been really difficult to watch. Right. Yeah. And I think too, because this will go into the last question as well. again, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, and Christian Brown. Like Bruce was a 6 starter that year, and Michael, just like this year, when he would have issues and he couldn't close or couldn't finish halves, well, Bruce did that. Well, that made them a lot better. Like they just didn't have tremendous drop off in the playoff context because you had a very good slasher who could hit threes, but also was a terrific defender. And you had multiple options you could utilize Bruce to do. And like the Nuggets don't have that. And, we're hoping, and this is what was unfair to Russ. Russ is 36 years old, and we're hoping he can save the Nuggets time in and time out. And I think that like asking a player of that age with his own deficiencies as a player to do that consistently, that speaks to the roster issue. And I think that speaks to the poor planning. And I think Watson still needs time to develop, which is perfectly fine. Like he's still super young. I think Julian is still coming along. But again, it's like Zeke Naji was your project and you paid him to be like the next guy. Yeah. But then that's not someone you can trust. And then, and you've heard me talk about this before, I know. I thought signing Dario Saric was based on his skill set, Jeff, was just so like baffling to me. He fell out of rotation. And so all this is to say, Jeff, when you look at this summer and highlighting kind of the key points of your article, what do you believe that the Cronkies have to get right this summer to kind of salvage these last 2 years and going into the rest of the Jokic era and to salvage the championship window for Denver?
There's 2 ways to approach this, and I think both are right. Either hire someone from outside, like a Matt Lloyd. People have tossed around Bob Myers. No way they're paying for Bob Myers. But guys like who have the gravitas and the ability to talk to agents, which is something the Nuggets have sorely lacked. I mean, they have like 9 players that are Jeff Schwartz players on this roster. They talk to other agents. You need to have agencies. Relationships with that other than them. So that is number 1. And number 2, I think if you get the guy like that, they can have a fresh eye, and then they could make even if you don't do anything this offseason, you have the ability to have someone with a fresh perspective look at this roster and say, okay, this is what we need. This is what we need. And then make adjustments either during the year or for next offseason. I would hopefully it would be during the year. Or 2, if you are going to go the Ben Tenzer, David Adelman approach, there has to be accountability for Josh Kroenke because he is going to have a major role inevitably in the shaping of this roster. If you bring in a guy like Tenzer, who is he's the G League GM, but obviously NBA is going to be different. It's going to be a first-time GM. You're going to have essentially a rookie head coach. You're going to need Josh to be there and accountable. And that is what I want. And both of those scenarios can actually work. Both of them can work. But it's going to require, either Josh Kroenke and Stan Kroenke giving up a little control to have the guy who can come in and do what it takes. Or B, Josh comes in, and if he's going to put his name on it and you're going to bring in Tenzer, you have to be accountable, because that is the biggest thing, because Tenzer's not going to have the gravitas or the weight behind him. Josh is the one who has to be steering the ship at that point.
I think those are both very salient points. I think for me, they have to be willing to make some hard decisions. And, again, the biggest piece is the Porter piece is like, what do they do? Are they going to trade? Can they find a trade? Who do you slot them in with? But also just with the bench. I think that, look, Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson, I think they're great ideas. But if you need to open up roster spots to have other players go on the roster, like what do you do? Will you be willing to make that work? Also, like the Dario player option thing, like that's going to be a big deal because, again, it doesn't matter if he takes it or not. You can't have $5.2 million sitting on your bench and not be able to contribute. Not in this CBA, not in a first apron team. It's literally like, it's impassable.
Yep.
Like it literally is untenable. Yep. You can't have your 6th highest paid player be something you can't use. And then Zeke Naji, that's another contract that has to be made a decision about. Like, what do you do? Like, you have to find a way to utilize your roster. And then on the other end of this, you do need to bring veterans into the building. So whether that's veteran minimum, whether that's another taxpayer MLE, I do believe adding some adults into the room is going to make a huge difference. for the regular season and for the rest of the culture and for the playoffs. And I think, to your point, Josh Kroenke, there does need to be a real sense of ownership and accountability that not everything you owe is to Jokic. I understand that's not how it works. But also in the NBA, it is how it works. Like, LeBron is the story. Jordan is the story. Shaq's the story. Kobe's the story. Magic is the story. Bird is the story. That is Hakeem. It is their team. The conversations about them and everything about you as an owner, they're going to remember you for what you did to help that player win. Okay. That's the way NBA stories are told. The reason why Dr. Buss is who he is, do you think that's just because he was a great decision maker? No, because he had Magic, he had Kareem, and then he made sure that they won, and he gave them James Worthy, he gave them AC Green, he gave them Michael Cooper, he gave them all these players. Go get it. And I think that's just kind of what the story has to be. It's like, how do you actually go about maximizing the roster for Jokic, taking accountability, everybody doing the job they need to do, and just not going into another playoff, Jeff, where you cannot survive because you don't have a backup big.
He also had Dr. Buss also had Jerry West,
right?
And the Kroenkes needed Jerry West, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, fully agree, y'all. Well, look, Jeff, this has been a great episode.
Of course,
this is going to be a long summer, so we will be having a lot of conversations, especially if we get into free agency, around the draft, even though they don't have a draft pick. What are they going to do? So there's going to be a lot more to come, but I do really appreciate you joining the show today.
Oh, of course, and I need you on CSG. I've never had you on it, so I need to correct that very big fault of mine right there.
No, yeah, I understand making the schedule work. We'll talk a little bit right after this, but y'all make sure y'all like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate y'all. Locked On Nuggets will be here for you all summer. Ryan, Matt, myself, deeply appreciative of y'all. Y'all, this was an incredible year, but guess what? The journey is still going. The marathon continues, y'all. See y'all on the other side.